Welcome everybody to today's webinar. We're talking about top trends in digital accessibility. Digital accessibility. I'm Dave Jones, VP of Marketing at GrackleDocs, and I'm your host for today's session. As you figured out, if you've been with us a couple of minutes, we're running this very much as a podcast style conversation. So expect a lot of insights, a lot of stories, a lot of straight talk rather than a slide-heavy presentation or anything like that. But just before we get going today, a couple of quick housekeeping notes, just to set the scene for where we're at. We are recording this session. The purposes of that are not for us to keep the recording for any reason other than to be able to send you guys a copy as soon as it's ready, and to allow the folks that haven't managed to join us live today to still access all of the great information that we're going to see. That recording will include full captioning. Apologies that we're not offering live captions today. Again, if you were on with us earlier, we've got 3 very different accents. And quite frankly, the live captioning technology that's out there at the moment just isn't quite up to the task of dealing with the 3 accents that we're throwing at it today. But we will get the video captioned and out to you via email as soon as we possibly can. And again, we are saving a little bit of time for some question and answers at the end. If you'd like to ask our guests today any questions at all, just drop them in the chat at any point and I'll get to as many as I can do at the end of the session. So with that, let's stop wasting time. Let me introduce you to our speakers today. And I'm joined by 2 absolutely fantastic guests. Jeff Mills is the co-founder of GrackleDocs. He's been working in and around accessibility and content technology for many years than he'll admit to. And he does genuinely bring both a practical and a strategic perspective to the topic. Shawn Jordison is our second guest today, and he's better known as the accessibility guy. He's an educator, a reviewer, and a general advocate of digital accessibility. And if you've seen his YouTube channel or his reviews, you know just how much of a straight talker Shawn is. And I'm really excited to get this conversation going today. But before we do that, Jeff and Shawn, can I ask you to just say a quick hello and tell folks a little bit more about yourselves, about what you do, and what got you into accessibility in the first case? Jeff, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah, no problem. And you're right, Dave. I've been around for a long time. So I worked it out. I've been in tech for over 30 years, and over 25 of those with some sort of digital accessibility project or other, and all across the world as well. So I used to be actually a techie myself, but I was so poor at it, I had to shuffle my seat to the business side of the class, where I'm still trying to prove myself. But the reason I got into accessibility was there's a couple of things. I'm the father of a daughter with a disability, and she's now in her 30s, which was one side. But my skill set, apart from trying to father her, didn't really help in the wider world. But I found I did have some skill sets that got me there. And when I was a techie, I was working on document conversion stuff, like high volume stuff, invoices, statements, and it was when it was going to print streams. So these printers that were the size of a building, and those counting like 5 million invoices at a time. And we were doing that for one of the large finance companies in the US. And they asked us to make these things called PDFs like 25 years ago. And I knew PDFs, so these little things on desktops, but what they wanted to do was create 5 million of these at a time for all of the invoices that were going through to be put onto the internet. And so we're looking at late, mid-90s, when it was all kind of a burgeoning new thing. So we started doing that. We created programs that would take this print stream and turn it into PDF and chunk it up to individual ones and store and view those on a personal basis. And then a few years later, they came back to us and said, we need those PDFs to be accessible. And we said, okay, I know what the word accessible is. How do we make PDFs accessible? Because no one really knew at the time. So we went away and looked at that, and we found the backstory for that is that one of the directors of that finance company was going to sue his own company because he was actually low vision and couldn't read the PDFs. So we got the whole backstory of how that happened. So we then created the system that did that as well, and then sold it to multiple other finance and utility companies worldwide, and it kind of went from there. And that kind of it carried on for many years until in the mid 2010s, Paul Walker and I decided to start GrackleDocs. So we're 9 years old this year. And come from the other angle of, rather than these high volume stuff, what about the millions of people creating billions of documents, and how do we help those guys make things as accessible as possible in an everyday basis? And that's when we come up with Grackle Workspace as our first product.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jeff. And Shawn, not quite as long a history, but just as storied. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I always like to start off with how I became the accessibility guy. I've been in accessibility forever. In fact, I was an early user of Grackle before it was as cool as it was today. And I love that fact. I've actually known Jeff for a super long time, maybe more now. I think we know each other better now today, but yeah, it's pretty cool. So I became the accessibility guy. My cousin actually recommended TAG because it was a perfect little acronym. I found myself in my various roles supporting colleges and institutions in accessibility. People were asking me the same questions over and over. So the brand of the accessibility guy was kind of an afterthought. And I was like, all right, if I'm making this video to send to this faculty on how to fix their table, I'm gonna make a video, put it on YouTube. And next thing you know, I'm well into 400 posted videos now. And yeah, outside of the accessibility guy, though, I've been in this space since I was 19 years old. I'm turning 35 this year. And so I like to think it's kind of the only job I've ever had. I've served in multiple capacities, converting textbooks to alternate formats for students with disabilities. I served as a teacher to students with disabilities at Santa Monica College, teaching students how to like intertwine assistive technology into their everyday use. I also served as a support person for all 116 California community colleges in the areas of alternate media and assistive technology. And now today, Shawn is the accessibility guy. And, we support businesses get accessible, much like Grackle does. And what a beautiful partnership I, hope to explore with you guys in the future. Anyways, that's a little bit of my backstory. Thank you for asking.
Not at all. Great to have you both with us. We're talking top trends today. So without further ado, let's dive in and kick things off with something that's really shaking up how public sector organizations in the US think about digital accessibility. And that's something called ADA Title II. So Jeff, I'm going to come to you to start with, if I can do. For those of us who aren't that familiar with US law, I'm going to give you an easy one, right? What is ADA Title II and what's changed recently about it?
Right, no, that is a good one. And yeah, you can tell from my English accent, American law is my first thing, but we're right in the mire of a lot of the ADA stuff. And I suppose if you roll back what ADA is, it started back in 1990 when it was signed into law, the Americans with Disabilities Act. And it's a guarantee of equal opportunity for people with disabilities in areas of public life. So the core principle of that is non-discrimination. Well, that was 1990. Some people probably on this call weren't even born then. So if you fast forward now to what that means in 1990, and I was saying what I was doing in 1995 was kind of electronic digital stuff. Well, today, it's still there. The state and local governments offer countless services online. If you think they've got people applying for benefits, paying taxes, getting emergency information, even things like accessing public transport schedules or taking online courses. That was all covered in the original ADA, but the world has moved on. So now the new ADA Title II, which came into force in April 2024, is really to make sure that the rule isn't creating a new obligation, but it is clarifying the existing one. So it's setting a specific legally enforceable technical standard for digital accessibility. So it includes things like the WCAG guidelines and PDFUA and internationally recognized benchmarks for making content accessible to people with a wide range of disabilities, visual or auditory or motor cognitive or anything else we can think of. And it applies to all content and mobile apps that state and local governments provide or make available. So it could even be through third-party vendors. It's not just what they make available themselves, but third-party vendors as well that are creating content on their behalf. And what the Title II pushes that forward to is to say there's now a deadline. This has got to happen by a certain point. So it was signed into law last year. And then there's two kind of sections that come up from that. So larger entities, so entities that are serving populations of more than 50,000 people, they've got until April 2026 next year to get this thing done. If they're a smaller entity, they've got until April the following year, 2027, to get things done. But it's in law. It's got to happen. And that's what we're right in the middle of at the moment, is making sure people are ready and good to go.
All right, so this is a big deal, right? It brings digital content into the accessibility scope for a lot of folks for the first time, I guess. So Shawn, with that in mind, right, how are organizations responding? And really, what are you seeing with respect to the things that they're doing to try and get ready for this?
Yeah, I'm seeing what we always see is once the realization sets in that this is a requirement, and it's not going anywhere, typically sheer panic. At the cost of doing business, how much time and effort it's going to take. But to Jeff's point, like ADAs existed since 1990, and the hard truth that I think is difficult for people to swallow is like, this has been a requirement. But these Title II updates, to Jeff's point, give us some actionable teeth through the WCAG standards. But I'm seeing a mad dash because people don't want to get hit with the fines. So now there are fines going to be enacted for those that are out of compliance. And I think that's the major shift. So in terms of what I'm seeing from people out there, I was kind of joking about the panic, but there is some panic, especially in the larger organizations. And I think that it's important for institutions to get aligned with people that can help them make the right decisions to get over these big hurdles of accessibility. PDFs are just one side of it. We've got PowerPoints, Word documents, Google documents, a variety of other things. And so, yeah, my advice to anyone listening to this call is to don't freak out, try to find somebody that can help guide you, and ask a lot of questions, and just know that, you're not the only organization that has this update. You're not the only person. It's not just your responsibility. It's going to be you, all your coworkers, your boss, every entity that you probably do business with is also impacted by this. I used to always say we're on the sinking ship together. So let's try to patch up all those holes. I think I answered the question.
You did. Love the optimism with it as well, Shawn. Great.
There's one thing I'm just going to throw in there as well. I agree with everything you said. And part of what's come into that law, and everyone's got to recognize as well, is that if you know something's wrong now, you can't wait until 2027 or 2026 to get it done, because they will go after you retrospectively. If they find out something wasn't right and you did nothing about it until you were exposed sometime after the date, they'll come after you. So you've got to start planning now.
Deliberately.
And Jeff, one of the things that Shawn said was that it's not just there's other organizations in the US that are facing this, but it's not just the US either, right? We're both based in the UK. We're seeing the European Accessibility Act coming into effect this year. So Jeff, what else is happening on a global basis? Because it's not just the US, right?
No, it really isn't. I mean, every country or region has something going on. They're all based roughly around the same sort of thing, especially where digital inclusivity is concerned. They're going to probably be around WCAG 2.1 AA. They're probably going to be around PDF UA, different things for the way that terminals will display information to you. But they're all kind of based around the same sort of thing. I mean, the EAA one, the European Accessibility Act, is imminent. And it's coming, I think it's June this year. It's April, May, June, 3 months away. So we're right on top of this, and to a really interesting thing that came out of end of last year with that happening, and looking at the ADA and how they're going to come after you for this stuff. I had a great report from Ireland. Ireland have already put into law that it'll be a criminal offence if you knowingly send something out that is non-compliant. Wow. And so they've already put it in law that the summary convictions can be of €5,000 or more and imprisonment up to 6 months. So it's not just a fine, it's imprisonment. And then indicted convictions are €60,000 and up to 18 months in prison. So, I mean, that's a shock factor. I mean, the reality of that actually coming to bear is probably quite low. But the fact that it's been written into law shows how seriously the rest of the world is taking this stuff. I mean, there's the AODA and the Accessibility Canada Act, and I mean, there's various acts all around the world that are doing roughly the same thing, and the push is now.
Absolutely. So big trend to start the conversation with today, and I want to really use that trend as our foundation, as the building blocks for the rest of the trends that we're going to talk to. And look, regulations are changing fast. That's the fact. It's all across the world. But I want to move on now from what's legally required to what's practically being used, and why that's starting to change, if you like. And what I want to specifically focus on is something called overlays and widgets. And Shawn, I want to come to you first here, if I can do. Can you give us a quick intro to exactly what accessibility overlays and widgets are, and why people use them?
Yeah, my understanding is that the basic premise: you could install a line of code on your site, and an overlay will attempt to filter all of the HTML content into an accessible way. There are challenges with using overlays and widgets that do things like that. And the major problem that we're seeing from the community in terms of pushback is that it's a band-aid approach to fixing accessibility, and it doesn't actually fix the underlying code. So companies that choose to engage with these overlays, the second they end the relationship or whatever, all of their content is now inaccessible again. Additionally, the accessing of these overlays or widgets with an existing assistive technology like JAWS can be very challenging. And it kind of is like, I always use this this analogy of shopping. Like, you go up to a store and you can see a jacket you want to try on through the window, but you can't get in there. And what an overlay does is kind of like put that shop inside of a building. So now we can't get into the building to look at the jacket that I want to try on. And the jacket is like the code. It's what's interpreted to the assistive technology. And we can't get to that code because the overlay is like, it's on top of it, and it's filtering. Now, I should be careful of what I say. The community has not taken to overlays very well. We all know that. I do think there is room for them in the modern space. I do not think they should be used as a band-aid fix, but there are some cool things that I've seen. Flipping color contrast with a click of a button, increasing font size up to 300% with a click of a button, language switching. Those are elements that I personally find valuable in those types of things. But yeah, it's a sticky wicket out there with overlays, and if your business is using them, I would encourage you to make sure you are still taking the steps necessary to move towards compliance. And the overlay needs to be a temporary band-aid.
Great advice. And I love the analogy of the jacket within the store, within the extra building. And Jeff, I think everything that Shawn said there is something that you would concur with. But assuming that organizations are realizing that overlays and widgets have a place, but they're maybe phase one of an ongoing journey, what does the rest of that journey look like, right? What are organizations using instead of overlays to address the underlying problem, if you like?
No, that's a really good point. And yeah, I completely agree with what Shawn said there, and probably adding to it, overlays do have their place. In certain instances, they were massively oversold as literally one line of code will solve all your problems. And just in January this year, the Federal Trade Commission required one of those online marketers to pay $1 million deceptive claim for overselling their product. I'm not going to go into names and numbers, but that's kind of where it went to. And so people need to realize that, yeah, you're right. There's so many good things in amongst this, but hides a bunch of other stuff and can make it worse. So you've got to kind of play this thing off. So what we're seeing now is that people going back to the tried and tested methods of things, of looking at things like manual testing and auditing. So getting someone to actually look at your website and get an accessibility audit that's conducted by experts, and go across all of the WCAG guidelines of that and make sure that they're okay. Looking at in-house accessibility training now, there's a lot of entities now coming to say, actually, we should know more internally rather than just rely on external sources. Not that external sources aren't great, but knowing stuff yourself really helps. And that kind of goes with consulting with accessibility experts with organizations that you know of as well. You know, really kind of filtering out to the people that you know already. One of the big things we do, and we're now convincing more and more people to do, is making sure that your testing is done with people with disabilities. So people who've got lived experience of what a user journey is like across the website is huge. WCAG covers so much, but even someone who knows how it really feels to try and get through that is key. And then the other thing is that we're seeing a lot more people, and we're helping a lot more people actually write their policies and governance frameworks, making sure that they're actually written down in front of people and get an executive buy-in that this has to happen this way. And we've seen that real shift over the last 6 to 9 months of that happening.
All right, interesting. It's a conversation that's ongoing, obviously, and what I'm hearing is almost that solving the problem first rather than hoping that automated accessibility is the answer is the third way to go, right?
Absolutely. There's kind of 5 bits here. 1, conduct your accessibility audit. It's going to be a combination of automated and manual testing. Second one is going to train your staff on the WCAG guidelines and inclusive design principles generally. Engage with users of disabilities for real world feedback. And then partner with accessibility platforms or consultants to help make that compliance strategy real and enforceable. And kind of just going back to the widget things, just avoid relying on them solely, that they may or may not meet the legal requirement and you won't know. So just don't rely on those solely.
All right, definitely. Sorry, Shawn, go on.
Yeah, I'm just going to add one thing. Jeff, you bring up a great point of a strategy to get accessible, and something, some language that I found for those of you on this call that might help you in researching a little bit is look up like implementing an accessibility maturity matrix model into your organization, because it can help you lay the framework of who needs to be trained on what, who's involved in doing what, developing an audit and an inventory of your content, and it can start to lay the framework for your organization to move from different categories of accessibility of no knowledge to being a leader in accessibility knowledge. So I just want to get that language out there because you literally described a maturity model, and I'm like, oh man. Before I knew that language, I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But how do you identify training for an organization that has 1,000 staff members? And I've personally been involved in that process now, and so I can speak to that, the effectiveness of applying a model to that scale. But anyways, I love this topic too, and yeah.
That's great advice. And a maturity model is a really interesting phrase as we move into our third trend of the day, and we've got about 25 minutes into the conversation without talking about AI.
I was holding on to it.
Something that we have to talk about, right? It's not as mature as some of the other things that we've been talking about, but it is certainly starting to hit us in the face. So Jeff, I'm going to throw you under the bus with this one as well. Kick us off with this, right? When we say AI in accessibility, what do we actually mean?
Okay, so let's break that down a little bit more to digital accessibility, because accessibility is way too wide for the 4 or 5 days I've got left on this call. So if we go down to digital accessibility, we essentially mean using artificial intelligence techniques like machine learning and natural language processing and even computer vision as tools to help make digital content like website, documents, apps more usable for people with disabilities. We definitely don't mean that AI is replacing human effort, but it's got to augment it. So we see it happening quite a few ways. AI is used in automated testing tools. They can quickly scan for common accessibility errors, missing descriptions like alt text or insufficient color contrast. They're really good at those sorts of things. It can be used to automatically generate content like initial drafts of alt text for images or captions of videos. It can be used to enhance assistive technologies like making screen readers a bit smarter or describing images in real-time translation apps. And it's even starting to assist creators by providing real-time feedback to build accessibility from the start. So the big potential benefits here are speed and scale. AI can tackle repetitive tasks across vast amounts of content, much faster than humans can, and we can see the kind of the mountain of stuff we've got to do in front of us. And that can potentially make accessibility efforts more efficient and cost effective. However, and it's a big however, and amongst all of this, it's crucial to understand AI's limitation. AI will often struggle with accuracy, context, nuance. For example, an AI generated alt text might describe what's in an image, but miss why it's important. And as we spoke about at the beginning here, auto captions can contain significant errors. Speaking of my dialogue versus Shawn's dialogue versus your dialogue, we'll have all sorts of mess coming up here. So we're really careful, and we are embracing AI, but we're not removing human oversight, review, and judgment. They're essential to everything we do. AI is a really powerful assistant, but it's definitely not going to replace the need for manual testing or thoughtful design. And again, the insights gained from involving people with disabilities in the process.
All right, that was almost the dictionary definition of AI and digital accessibility, Shawn. I think that the takeaway there, the summary, right, is risk versus reward. And what are you seeing in terms of those risks and those potential rewards with AI, Shawn?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot happening. AI is here, and it will only get better. In terms of how it applies to accessibility, you know, the truth is I'm torn. I am such a new tech person. I love new tech. I love AI. I use it all the time. However, to your point, I use it, right? So I try to get it to ask me questions on how I can help it understand the situation better. And even still, there are common pitfalls. But what I will say is this big statement. And I have a philosophy that while many of us are trying to design better here in the state, VCR players, tape players, right? AI is Netflix, Hulu. And I think that it's important that leaders in this space, or, you know, us or anyone really, that we don't get trapped playing the same VCR tapes, the same way it's used to be done. I think it's important that we embrace innovation and change with constraint. But I have this philosophy that we're going to bypass the need for documents. Like, there's a lot of automated solutions to tag PDFs. Why? Why tag a PDF when you can make the content in HTML and it be accessible on every device? Language switching, you know, that's just my own personal philosophy. I think that in a few years' time, we will be having different conversations about document accessibility and its existence. I don't know. I like to think AI. I have this beautiful dream. I'm going to type into an AI thing that says, I want my pizza order delivered to my house. And it's going to go to the site, order it with my credit card, show up to my door. If AI can do that, why can't it properly tell me the takeaways of a budget report? I think that I personally am trying to embrace it, but I'm so cautious. If you are working in any type of entity that deals with the public, you cannot just slap AI onto something and post it. You use it as I use it as an executive assistant, misspellings, ideas that I maybe miss, but we cannot rely on AI as a rubber stamp solution. No matter if it's an overlay, if it's solving world hunger, I will have big questions, you know, about how it's actually being implemented. So with that said, I'm totally stoked about it. I am so excited about the use of AI in documents, and I can't wait to see what happens. I just hope that our community, my fear is our community is so in love with VCR players and tapes that, you know, we may take a long time to embrace, you know, AI.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I think there's the, you know, going back to one of the things you're talking about, is it comes to that over-reliance. I think there's a real danger at the moment. We get this over-reliance that there's this magic bullet is already here, and we're just going to skip that human testing and judgment side. And we've been playing with AI pretty hard for the last year. We've got our own AI people in-house that are building products. And we see the good, the bad, and the ugly every day. We can do something through AI 1 minute and it comes up with the Holy Grail. and then the next minute it comes up with some sort of golem that's creeping in the corner. We can never quite work out why, because AI's done its own thing. And that's the 100%. AI guy's return. It's like, yeah, sometimes it'll do that. And so if we get rid of that kind of human testing and judgment, who knows quite what monster you're going to see, right?
And it's so confident too.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah,
you could feed it like WCAG standards and ask it a question, and it will sometimes answer so confidently incorrect, you know, and you'll be like, that's not true. Yeah, it's just a trick. And then other times, you ask for grandma's recipe on a chicken from childhood, and it will give you 5 options of, you know, different countries of different like, it's just ridiculous, of different ingredients, you know, absolutely thought out and detailed the breakdown ingredients, you know.
Oh yeah, we're seeing it every day. It's quite hilarious, and it is getting better after time and training and modeling and all those sorts of things. It's definitely getting better, but every now and then it comes up with this thing and you think, how did you do that? How on earth did you think that was a good thing? So yeah, it's an interesting one.
Great feedback, guys. And I work across a lot of different industries, and one of the terms that I'm hearing across multiple industries at the moment is augmented intelligence as opposed to artificial intelligence. Jeff, I think that's building on what you were saying about there still needs to be a human in the loop.
Yeah.
And you know, we shouldn't allow AI to make any critical decisions at the moment. Use it as an educator, use it as an insight generator, and move on from there, but make sure that those humans are included. And talking about including humans, we've had a lot of questions sent in from people that can't be with us live today. I'd also encourage you all who are listening today, get your questions in to the chat facility at the moment. It's a little bit quiet in there at the moment, so let us have them, and let's start answering some of those. So let me just ask you some of the questions that have come in. Oh, we've got some good questions here for you guys. Let's start with an easy one.
That means it's going to be really difficult.
That means it's going to be really hard. Shawn, let's throw this one at you.
Bring it on.
I've given Jeff some tough ones so far. What's the most common mistake organizations make when starting out with accessibility?
Thinking that it can be solved in 1 week.
All right.
I mean, honestly, the mistake is it's systemic. So while I tend to work with a lot of education institutions and government entities, those are like most of the time who I'm working with. What we find is it needed to be done yesterday. We don't have any money, and we don't know what we're doing. That's what I see a lot. And so it takes time to implement accessibility in a meaningful way. It takes time to caption 100 biology lecture videos, and the professor who's teaching biology might not want to do it. And so we need to, you know, leverage technology, leverage companies that support these people who are doing this work in order to make a impact. If you want it done in a week, I hope you have some money in your budget for it, because that's just it's just the truth, you know. Even if that means implementing in-house training, it doesn't happen overnight. You don't send Jeff can't come take the accessibility guy's PDF training and walk away knowing how to remediate a PDF. I mean, I'm going to need you, Jeff, to attend PDF 1, PDF 2, PDF 3. I'm going to be on email support for you. And I'm going to give you perfect documents, and you're still going to have questions. That is just the nature of the beast. So yeah, what I'm seeing out there is that.
Yeah, we have the same. We kind of from the other end, and one of the things we kind of often say to people is, we're not trying to swallow the elephant here, because this thing is too big. Let's go through this systematically, and this is the process. Let's get through this. But I can guarantee you one thing: tomorrow, if you start today, tomorrow you'll be one step better than you were yesterday. So let's start.
I love that. I love that. That is great advice, and I try to do that too for my people I work with. People get freaked out, you know, the looming deadlines, and it's like, let's take a deep breath. Do the best we can and try to improve our processes moving forward.
Definitely.
All right, great advice. Jeff, let's come to you quickly on this one. And someone's asking questions exactly the way that I would, so you're gonna love this one. Who usually drives accessibility efforts inside an organization, and who should be driving?
Oh wow, okay. Well, who should be everybody. That's who should be doing it. Everyone should be well educated to understand that accessibility isn't just about the odd blind person or someone who can't hear properly. It's general accessibility, and everyone should be there. Who actually drives it? It's interesting, because we've gone through this process recently We have like 1,200 customers, regular customers a year. They're mainly blue chip. And we had to go through a process of, right, okay, who's the champion in there and who's buying from us? We've come up with almost 40 different personas from 1,200 customers. So I wish I could come up with who's driving it, because we just don't know. And it's so frustrating, because if we knew, we'd go into every company and find that person and say, hey, what are you doing? And we're not getting it. So we have, in some places, they have the head of accessibility. Perfect. I know that title. I can talk to you. We know what we're doing. In other times, it's the chief marketing officer who says, I've heard somewhere, I've got to drive this thing. Can you help me? So we'll go and do that. Sometimes it's a CTO. CTO will come up and say, actually, this thing isn't right. How do I do this stuff? Sometimes it's a department head. Sometimes it's a guy on the floor. We do a lot with education. Sometimes it's students that are driving it. Students reach out to us and say, hey, I've heard about this thing. I really want to push this thing locally. And then suddenly we work within a university and they've pushed it to the right people. So yeah, I love the question. And I also hate it because I can't answer it exactly, because there's just so many answers. It's crazy.
I would say it depends on the institution. From what I've noticed from the YouTube channel, right? People that tend to watch my content are in the work effort. They're in the trenches of accessibility in their position at their organization. So from my perspective, what I'm seeing is a bottom-up approach. Where this creates conflict is typically employees don't have the decision buying power to purchase training, software, or usable applications that will help them become successful in making their content accessible, but also they are a small fish in a very large pond at their institution. And then in other cases, when I've seen the top-down approach, they throw money at training and they throw DEIA statements around willy-nilly. The truth is, it doesn't always get to the bottom. Oh, they took the webinar. Now they know how to make PDFs accessible. There maybe is a lack of follow-up or a lack of drive. I think companies can help shape that by implementing accessibility into their mission. Like, we don't do stuff inaccessibly, and if we can drive that, I think it can help both from an intrinsic and extrinsic point of view, from staff people in the ground floor versus executives. But that's just my opinion. And I'm with you guys. Like, I've been championing accessibility my whole career, and some organizations are really good at it and some aren't.
Yeah.
And I love that, because you just answered the next question that I was going to ask you to a degree, which is, how do you prioritize accessibility within an organization when time, budget, or resources are limited? And I love that idea of baking it into your mission statement. And I want to move on to another question, which is why I'm sort of skimming over that one, because I love this one as well. Shawn, I'm going to throw this one at you first. What's the biggest myth or misunderstanding you still hear about accessibility?
Biggest myth?
Wow.
That's a good one. I just made a video, came out recently on the reading order of PDFs. I don't even know what the answer is anymore. I've been doing this so long. But there's a lot of confusion on how screen readers and assistive technology interpret reading, whether it's HTML, PDFs. And I just want to clear the statement and say, it depends on a lot of factors: your operating system, your assistive technology, the application you're using, the native file format. There's so many things that go into it. And especially with PDF, for those of you who are listening so intently, get your tags order to match your content panel to match your reading order panel in that order is my best advice. Anyways, that's probably the biggest myth, but I feel like that's a cheap one. But in terms of my directness with people that engage with my content, it's a big one. And color contrast, what do we do? So yeah, what about you, Jeff?
Yeah, I think the biggest myth that we have probably more when we're outbounding, trying to talk to people that don't know too much about this stuff, is that accessibility is just for a few people. It's just going to help a few people. What's the point? It's a lot of effort. Come on, really? Do we really need to do this? And then you say, well, hold on a minute. If you get accessibility right, everyone gets right. I mean, I'm a man of a certain age now. I go into a restaurant and I guarantee me and my friends are all similar age. Every restaurant we go into, we pick up the menu and it's in a dark room. We have to get our camera phones out, light the thing up, or magnify on the screen to read this thing. And I just got a mild kind of aging eyesight. Well, if that was done correctly in the first place, I could see this stuff. I could order my stuff easily. The same with websites. If I go to the websites, we work with one of the major airlines, and pretty much the only thing we do for them at the moment is make sure that their digital menus are accessible, so that people, before they can go and pre-order, they can go onto their website and look at the menu and see what flight they're on, and that will come back accessibly. It's the silly things like that. It's a big audience out there. There's a thing in the UK called the purple pound. So sorry if you guys are not from the UK, but I'm not quite sure what the US equivalent is. But the purple pound is the buying power of people with disabilities. And it's about £1 trillion, because it's not just the people with disabilities, it's their friends, their supporters, their co-workers, their support group around them. That's all of their buying power that you're missing out on. So all of the guys that say, oh, it's not worth it, it's not worth this, there's this much money, it's just for a few people, you're wrong. Stop thinking that way. It's a myth.
I love that.
Fantastic advice, chaps. But unfortunately, that's all we've got time for.
I was just getting into my rant zone as well.
I thought you were getting
build up.
I haven't quite finished with you two yet, so I'm coming back. But genuinely, huge thanks, Shawn, Jeff, for sharing your stories, your insights, and also thanks to all of you who joined us today live. And look, we've covered an awful lot of stuff. We looked at how Title II is changing the game for public digital services. We looked at why overlays aren't necessarily the only answer. And of course, we looked at what AI is going to do in accessibility in the coming years. But just before we go, I want to give Jeff and Shawn a chance to have virtually the final say. And I want you guys to send us away with one key thing that we can all do within our own organizations to drive our own accessibility missions forward. Shawn, I want to come to you first on that one.
Yeah, what I see right now, the greatest impact you can have is resource share. So if you found something cool, hey, I can make this chart accessible in PowerPoint with just a couple of clicks, share it with your colleagues. If you find webinars, share it with your colleagues. In my opinion, knowledge is power. And that statement still rings true for accessibility. And that's part of why I like doing what I do. Share my content, share Grackle's stuff. There's so much content out there around accessibility right now. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be right about accessibility. Just talk about it. Let's just talk about it. More talking is going to get us there. That's my my advice.
Love it. And Jeff, same question to you. What's that one key thing that we can all do to drive those accessibility missions?
It ties in a little bit. Speak up. You see it, you talk about it, and you talk about it with everyone around you. You reach out to people like us off your own bat, even if it's not in your remit. Call us, give us an email, ask some advice. We love giving advice. As you can tell today, we love speaking up for ourselves. You ask us something, we'll try and help for sure. But speak up and tell other people about it and just get on with it.
Fantastic advice, guys. Again, huge thanks to both of you for being here today, for sharing everything that you have shared. And again, thank you all for joining us today. As I said at the start, we will send out that recording as soon as it's been captioned to you all via email. In the meantime, if you'd like to get any more information on GrackleDocs or on Tag, the accessibility guide, just quickly scan those QR codes on the screen afterwards. But for now, thank you again.
Dave, there was one thing we had. I was going to tell you a joke about time travel, but you didn't.
Were going to tell us a joke about.
You didn't like it,
but we didn't like it. Oh dear! For those of you who are with us just before the start of the session, that's a follow-on. You need to watch the recording. Genuinely, thank you all for joining us today, and we'll see you next time or the time before if we're taking Jeff's time travel joke seriously.
Yeah, there we go.
Hey,
thanks guys.
You guys for having me.
Cheers, guys. Bye bye.
Thank you for having me. Bye, everyone.